Hi everyone, thank you for taking the time out to come and see us. Yeah, I'm George, as I said, the co-founder, COO of Buds. Sorry. I look after a bit of everything. Delivery and execution within the business. Any more feedback? No, we're good. I'll hand over to my panelists to introduce themselves. So, Alexey.
Hello. Hello. Hi. My name is Alexey. I am a CTO of Kroo Bank. For those who don't know, and it's okay not to know, we're a new bank. We are operating in the UK for about 2 years, fully licensed, have a digital current account, so please do check us out. I head up our technology function at Kroo.
Hi, and I am Richard Berkley. As said, I lead on data analytics and AI in financial services. So that's the space I've been working on as a consultant for the last 30 years. And we, as PA Consulting, we do a full range of consulting services with about 4,000 people, for those that don't know us.
Great. So just to kind of set the context about, because I can imagine not everybody knows what the innovation dilemma is. It's when a new disruptive technology emerges in a market, how do you deal with integrating that or choosing to integrate that when it might compete with the KPIs or objectives that you have as either a business leader, business owner, or a head of department within a firm, or particularly in a banking firm. So an example of that is, do you choose to embed, say, a new Gen AI chatbot when it could reduce your budget by 50% because it could reduce your headcount by maybe 20 or 30%? How do you deal with that conflicting view when you might know, hey, this is the right thing, but this competes with me as a person, what I care about, what I do? So I'll first hand over to Alexey to see how he's dealt with things as the leader of technology of his bank.
Right. I think it's a great, frame to look at the, the challenge that we're all facing is exactly when to embrace those new up-and-coming technologies and how to think about them. And I guess the choice being offered is whether to focus on almost like optimizing existing value chains, right, and kind of ignore the disruption and let others do the risking. Or fully embrace it and potentially miss out on some opportunities in existing business, right? So our approach to this is to try and do both within reason. So we certainly do a lot of optimization of existing business and focus on the most profitable of most valued customers for ourselves, as well as we look a little bit beyond and we try to service the kind of customers that are not particularly valuable to us right now, but we think they're underserved.
So not to kind of bat that over, but you're obviously quite a technologically advanced bank compared to some of the banks that myself and Richard might deal with from a selling and implementing perspective. Richard, how does that compare to what you've seen when you're kind of looking at it from a consultancy perspective as far as, the willingness for the clients that you work with to try and adopt this technology that again might conflict with somebody's personal views?
Yeah, I think that we all see the challenge between the innovators, the people who are keen to adopt, the people who are experimenting and can see the potential with those people in the organization that either have a responsibility and accountability for managing risk, for compliance, and have a long history of serving the bank legitimately for ensuring safe running of the bank, and also the people in the business running business units where their job is running the business as effectively as possible. Their skill is doing that. It's not in the innovative technology that is coming in. So there's that conflict, that pressure, that discussion between the innovators and both the risk teams and also the business areas to say where can this be used effectively. And I think ultimately it has to come down to two things. So one is the business value, so actually laying out the business value, getting the buy-in through the implications, and then also I think that there is a need to experiment and learn as well, to prove the concept, to do things incrementally, to show what the art of the possible is, and therefore to build commitment.
But but with that, I think kind of one thing that we probably all experience is like the, development resource constraints. And I think something that like tends to be quite difficult, especially with emerging technologies, especially in kind of innovation, is how to time it. So like as an example, if everybody went all in on ChatGPT 2, they would have wasted a hell of a lot of time, energy, and money, to be frank, versus where we are today. So how do you deal with that, those conflicts of interest, especially with the kind of timing of, people maybe not be too convinced around where the technology is today? Do you kind of start really going for it right now and the expectation that it'll get better? Or do you keep backed away and try and be a second mover, as an example?
Yeah, I mean, again, to some extent that depends on the strategy of the bank. So do you want to be bleeding edge? Do you want to be leading? Or are you a fast follower? And that will come to some extent to the size of the bank, the scale, the history, and the differentiation for the smaller banks is that ability to be agile, to be able to adopt that leading technology fast, whereas the differentiation for the bigger, more traditional banks is the scale, and being able to shape what they do on a model that will scale up effectively. And you can only get to that through experimentation, through being able to fail fast in small measures and then work out what works before you then scale up effectively.
Alexey, you mentioned kind of low-hanging fruit and kind of dealing with, the small, potentially less risky things. Do you have any examples of things that have worked well in that perspective for Kroo?
Yeah, so well, first of all, how do we actually go about picking those low-hanging fruits, right? So there are a couple of things that worked for us and perhaps, worth sharing. So one thing is we routinely do sort of company-wide hackathons, where we get together for a couple of days and we try to solve a business problem in teams. And the team is comprised of both technologists and business people. And we try to, frame problems that we're trying to solve, that something is solvable within a couple of days, right? And obviously, some of them are less ambitious than the others, but, some of them are surprisingly interesting. And it's surprisingly that, you can do quite a lot in 2 days, right? Once you put your mind to it. That's kind of one thing that worked. But in kind of continuing that theme, we really believe that innovative companies are bottom up, as it were. Yeah. So we're not trying to, I guess, force people to innovate. We're just trying to give people tools and time, and a bit of space, headspace, most importantly, to figure out what are the pressing solvable problems in their line of business and how they can be solved with innovative technologies.
Then, Richard, kind of one of the key points there was around like the ambition of the companies. One of the frustrations that I have as a seller of technologies tends to be a lack of ambition that you might see when you're kind of selling into some of your primary customers. I mean, I can think of an example of a project that we did earlier in the year, and we're working on this PFM chatbot, but 30 out of the 31 requirements were around the FAQs, and then one line was around search transaction data. And it's one of those things where the lack of understanding that people might have over, not wanting to go for it as far as what is the biggest value add for the customer, but more embedded in the how do we migrate legacy technology? How do you deal with that as kind of an implementer or a deliverer of these technologies?
Yeah, I don't think it's quite as simple as lack of ambition. I think the ambition is there. I think the challenge is how do you overcome all the hurdles, whether those hurdles are around legacy technology or the accessibility and quality of the data, or indeed the understanding of the business and both the leadership and the people, the colleagues in the business. And I think a lot of this is about education. It's about, Alexey, what you were talking about, bringing the innovators together with the business owners. And I think you can do that to some extent as well in the larger banks, but that it's a more complex move. It requires a bigger change in culture from where the larger banks have been in the past. So how do you embed a culture of innovation, a culture of agility in the bank, and and to do that, you have to do that, I think, from top down, so that you get the ideas coming from bottom up. And so, so it's a complex equation. But we are seeing with enterprise scale changes, moves to, for example, value streams or platform models in the banks. Part of the benefit of that is trying to build a much smaller business unit around value, around outcome, so that that unit can be more agile, so that it can have all of the capabilities that are required to innovate, and therefore be able to adopt that innovation faster.
Sure. So, Alexey, from your side, like as you start to adopt more and more AI, to kind of put it in contrast with what the incumbents might see, do you see a world where the AI technology that's emerging starts to fully automate some of your systems, so that you don't need some of your departments anymore? Because obviously that's, again, conflicts heavily with, what we see in a lot of the times in the kind of large scale institutions, of they wanting to keep their teams, keep their budgets, keep everything. Do you see a world where, you reduce your, say, credit risk team to 1 or your customer service team to near 0?
I think in reality, some of the functions would probably be reduced as a result of this transformation. But I'm not sure. I haven't seen that exactly at our firm just yet. So we definitely gain some, I guess, operational agility from being able to move people around from some roles which were a little bit more automated to other roles where people add more value than any of the agents or AI agents just yet. So that definitely works well for us. In the future, I guess we see the future. We see that we'll be able to evaluate the performance of various processes and functions, either operated by humans or AI agents alongside, and just decide what works best for us. I think it's going to be a combination of.
Yeah, and I think it's about time, isn't it? What we don't know is how quickly the technology will evolve. So obviously we've got general AI at the moment, but where's that going to go next, and how fast is that going to happen? I'm sure we will get to the point where credit risk functions become automated with the people who are doing the governance and shaping, as opposed to making the decisions. And to some extent, generative AI can already do that, but the important part is the controls, the governance that's needed around it. Because if you look at what a credit risk team does, it's actually the learning that the credit risk officers have had from studying data over many years that is informing their decisions. And Gen AI is really good at studying data. So actually what you're doing in enacting an AI decision in the credit space is you're linking together what the credit risk person is doing with the actual application of the rules that they are applying, and putting it all through Gen AI. And the AI is going to get better and better, and it's going to get better than the credit risk person. But the governance is about making sure that that you're doing that in a fair and transparent and governed way, and therefore how you establish that well is really important.
I think that's probably, for me, a good way, like, to try and make it impactful for the people here, so they're kind of learning something. Say somebody's here is really keen to embed a new technology into either the business that they work for, or as a business owner, but they may be meeting resistance either internally or from a different department or whatever. How would you go about kind of selling this technology in, or how would you go about convincing? What are the metrics that you would look at? How do you, convince yourself? Obviously, you started with the kind of hackathon. How do you go from there?
Yeah, so I mentioned earlier incremental. I think you have to start small. You have to generate the learning from going through that process. You have to do proof of concepts, proof of values, and be prepared to do it in a manner that allows failing fast, which means that you only do it in spaces where you can roll back very quickly, where you're not actually affecting critical decisions. So, so putting in place that environment that allows that innovation on a small scale, and then as you prove it, then putting in place the culture that allows scaling up effectively in the business.
And maybe I can add to that as well, because I was talking about bottom up, but one thing that worked really well for us, and I think that was essential, is to focus on the top down, kind of increasing, I guess, the risk management culture around managing AI models holistically across the organization, because we definitely had some functions that could do it better, independent model reviews and whatever, but the other areas we just didn't know how to assess the risk of automation, right? Had no idea. And people who made decisions also didn't really feel comfortable with some of the decisions because they didn't know how to manage. So we had to go through this painful exercise of building this holistic risk management culture around managing AI models to be able to make those decisions, right? And that worked well for us. So once we had this in place and we enabled risk managers to evaluate risk specific from this particular type of automation, we could go faster.
Okay, and then, because I think it's pretty clear we're all on the side of get the best technology in, to try and put a different spin on it, have either of you ever had kind of a new technology that you've tried to embed that has just simply failed or like not worked out in the way that you'd expect it to?
Yes, and I think that this is why, particularly with generative AI, it's an easy tool to use, but it's a really difficult tool to govern and to get value out of. So there is a need to learn as to how to be able to use it effectively. If you give it to people, they will find things to do with it that you could never imagine. It's a bit like when spreadsheets arrived, and we totally lost control of spreadsheets and the applications of spreadsheets, and have been trying to put it back in the box ever since. So being able to shape that box effectively ahead with generative AI, and then be able to have the use of it effectively within that context. That makes sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Alexey, anything from your side?
Yeah, certainly. We had some things going wrong spectacularly, but I guess what we're trying to do is to your point, Richard, is trying to make a small incremental changes rather than the big bang releases that sort of try to solve like a big problem. So we're trying to solve small problems, right? And if that fails, usually the results are not that catastrophic, so we can roll back, change, repeat, that sort of stuff.
Yeah, and again, for smaller organizations, the rollback is easier. For larger organizations, obviously the rollback becomes much more complicated, which is why you've got to build the confidence and be assured of what you're actually delivering. And the more that the breadth of applications and use cases that you're permitting, the more difficult that becomes, which is why it's a new, particularly generative AI brings in a new challenge around governance. It brings in a new set of risks that you need to be managing.
Great, thank you. I think, is that time? We've got time for one more. Tell you what, we weren't going to do this, but I will open up. Does anybody have a question they want to ask today? Go for it. I'm going to hand you the mic.
Cheers, thanks, gents. I did put this through on the app, but so the dialogue itself seems very predicated around the conflict that sits between a reduction of headcount and that counteracting, culture and business objectives and things like that. I personally, in my business, takes a very different stance entirely, which is and therefore we possibly solve the innovator's dilemma, which is that you should be increasing capacity. So it means what took 1x to do. So 1 FTE did 1x. It's 1 FTE plus AI now equals 4x. Actually, you should just be lowering the cost of cognition and increasing capacity and allowing the same population to do so much more. Isn't that giving you greater value with something a human being that you've already invested in all that sort of cognitive power that you've spent all those years on. You know, I'm not saying that nobody loses their job, but machines never took anybody's jobs. Machines took jobs of people who didn't know how to use machines.
Yeah, I mean, a couple of comments on that. The first, that in each of the revolutions that we've had, the industrial revolution, the technology revolution, we're still all employed. So I'm convinced that with the advent of AI, the same will be the case. And the key is adapting appropriately. Society adapting, which it will do, firms adapting, and the firms that don't adapt are the ones that will go out of business. And we've obviously got a track record of firms going out of business with the technology revolution, but new shapes have arisen through that, and key therefore is reskilling the workforce appropriately.
I just would just want to run over, but I just realised that I do completely agree, and that's kind of how to position it. The only difference I would say is there is a difference between people that can use that extra capacity versus already incumbent scaled businesses, like, you know, banks that have these massive customer services team where they're not really growing their customer base that much more. Like, you know, they may be growing it a couple % year on year, and they have hundreds of people in customer services. Likelihood is they will reduce that headcount in that specific area. They'll probably redistribute the budget and grow the headcount somewhere else to be able to affect more things. But we have to probably be, in those types of businesses, you do probably have to be alive to the fact that, like, embedding some of this will end up reducing headcount, and that's just something. But I completely agree with your positioning, and that's exactly how you should go about kind of convincing people, embedding it, going about it. It's like, this isn't about reducing your budget, this is about redistributing your budget. Okay, thank you everyone for joining. I hope you enjoyed that, and hopefully it was valuable.